rugby, working with the Bulls now. Gary's vastly experienced in rugby, and he knows what it is to be at the coalface of a Rugby World Cup and all the pressure that goes with it. So welcome, Gary. Nice to have you on the show, and thanks for joining us.
No, thanks, Craig. Thanks for the invitation, and looking forward to chatting rugby.
Well, we've had a lot of rugby. It's been a great tournament so far. We've had a lot of interesting games. We'll get to the big stuff in a moment. South Africa, Ireland, of course, that is the big talking point. But some of the other teams just around, Portugal have been quite impressive, Gary. Uruguay, I mean, some of these tier 2 nations have done quite well. I mean, those, we won't get too deep into them, but have they caught your eye as well?
Yeah, they have. You know, I obviously know them intimately from my past life at the USA. It's great to see. It's great to see that the tier 2 countries actually can throw a few punches, and but it's really interesting as well to note that they started that SLA competition in 2020 in South America. Uruguay and Chile and those teams were losing to. We're losing about 40, 50 points in test matches, and, you get a team together and you get some cohesiveness, and they play together for 6 months, as Portugal did in the Super Rugby Cup in Europe. So it's just great to see, and that's all that the tier 2 teams are asking for. They just need regular game time together as, if not a national team, at least most of the national team players, which is what happens with Selknam and Penarol and those teams.
Yeah. And it's good to see. And I mean, obviously, we've seen Fiji having the benefit of being in Super Rugby as the Boer. And, they get to play together a lot more. And they've had a good build up to the World Cup. So that's looking good for them. And as you mentioned there, Chile. And, okay, obviously, Namibia struggling a little bit, a few other teams. But in general, I think the standards feels to have gone up across the board.
But again, Craig, I mean, take that example of Namibia. That they have no opportunities to play together. They can't even play in a Currie Cup. A lot of their players are playing abroad, and that doesn't actually happen in Portugal. 1 or 2 of them have now got Pro D2 contracts. Yeah. But otherwise, that Chilean team is Selknam. That's who they play as for 6 months. And that's exactly what happens with the Uruguayan team. They play as Penarol, and they play for 6 months. And that's what happened with the Portuguese team, and they played Super Rugby. So that's where World Rugby, in my opinion, are getting it wrong with these tier 2 nations. Drua need to play as Drua. Mano Pacifica play as Mano Pacifica. And then it attracts the players back to the country. And the big issue is if you can afford that. That's the big issue.
Yeah, and I mean, that's probably a conversation for another day. But let's turn it out to the tier 1 nations. There was the blockbuster opening weekend, All Blacks France. I don't think, surprisingly, France won that game. They were under a lot of pressure, but they got over the line in a slightly weird game that only broke open in the last sort of 10 or 20 minutes there for France. But and they've had the injury problems since then. Just let's touch on the Antoine Dupont injury. I mean, that's a huge blow for France. Do you think, Gary?
It is, Dupont, Marchand, and Intermac. I mean, yeah. You can't write a worse script if you tried for a host nation. But I think that's going to change. I think Dupont, from all the stories that I've heard, I think Dupont will be available for the quarterfinal. I hear Marchand's going to be back as well. So, I mean, they've got such great strength in depth. I mean, you've just seen their junior programs over the last couple of years doing so well. So, they're a real force to be reckoned with, and they probably be playing with 16 men with that volatile, very passionate support group that they've got right around the country. So it's been great to watch. I must say it's really been a spectacle of a Rugby World Cup.
I can tell you from having been here, some of the organisation hasn't been that great. I was in Marseille the weekend of the England game, the opening game against Argentina, and luckily, I went in a slightly different entrance, but the massive fans were coming in the main entrance, and there was a real crush, a potential for, a very nasty situation, which fortunately didn't happen. But the trains are crammed. A lot of people, like security people, weren't really sure who goes where and how. And these are kind of teething problems, but I think the organisation has got a bit better as the tournament's gone on, ironing out the kinks. But that opening weekend, even the opening game which I was at Stade de France, was pretty chaotic in terms of getting to getting in.
I've heard that it's been well publicised on socials, but none more so than the fact that some stadiums have run out of beer. I think that's a crisis.
Well, that is a crisis in a rugby game for sure. Anyway, speaking of beer, there was no shortage of beer at Stade de France on Saturday night, and there was no shortage of passion. The Irish fans were brilliant. I mean, you'll know the Irish very well from all your experience in the game. And they said 30,000 came across, but I promise you, out of the 78,000 or 79,000 in the stadium, it felt like 60,000. That's what Sexton said afterwards. But and that was, Gary, just sitting in the stands. I don't know what it felt like on TV, but to me, it felt like one of the most intense games of rugby I've ever witnessed live. Really, the line speed, the tackles, the hits, the full-on commitment from both sides just felt like a notch higher than most things you see. And I don't know what that is. It was just visceral. And take us through that. I mean, did you feel watching that as a coach's eye, but also as a spectator? Did you feel it looked more intense than most things you've seen so far?
Oh, not even a question of a doubt. No, it was absolutely brutal. It was brutal from both sides. I think it was an absolutely fascinating game of rugby from an analysis point of view as well. Again, 2 or 3 scenarios that come to mind. We had a line out on the halfway line. We won the ball beautifully. We went into the midfield with Sia. Caleb Doris absolutely milked Sia, got the turnover. Then a scrum on the right-hand side, we went wide. We came back off that, and Gary Ringrose hit Jasper Visser, and they got the turnover on that. And for me, and then obviously that incident a little bit later, when he literally picked up Eben and got the scrum award from keeping him in the air. That was just a sign for me that they had consciously made a decision that they were going to try and match us physically. And I think they did that, I don't think there was anything wrong with our performance. In fact, I think we performed quite well. Obviously, one or two of the glaring things that are being spoken about all the time that I think, are quite easy to fix. But in terms of the intensity and the level of intensity, it gave me a lot of confidence to think that, those two teams could very probably meet in the final, because it's going to take very special teams to be able to meet or match that intensity. And in my humble opinion, I think there are only 2 teams out there that can match that. That's France themselves. Yep. And I think, dare we ever say this about the All Blacks team that they're dark horses, but I think they are dark horses. I think you make a big mistake if you write them off. And so that's those are the only 2 teams I see who can be able to live with that kind of intensity, because it was ferocious. It really was. And, the tackles, the carries were massive. Just some of the game management was exceptional. Ireland changed their attack shape a little bit and actually moved the ball a little bit wider and hurt us a little bit wider than the normal defenders. So, and I think, that gave them some good go forward there. But, we did some exceptional things. I mean, our line out contesting work was brilliant. How many teams in the world that on the international stage in that pressure lose your first 5 line-outs and go on and win the game?
And they lost their first 2 scrums, Gary.
Yes,
they were free kicked at the first scrum and then a penalty at the second scrum. So they lost their first 5, 6, 7 set pieces. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and it speaks to the leadership for me. It speaks to the guys like Paul O'Connell, and I can just picture Paul being calm, cool, and collected, and saying, "Let's try this option. This is how they're contesting. Fine, they've got our number, but let's just get back onto the program. No problem." It was just such a mastery from both teams in skill execution, in entertainment, in leadership. There was just a lot to admire. I know South Africa didn't win the game, and and I also know that it's easy when you don't win the game and you can point to the things that went wrong. But I just think we got a huge amount of things right. On the day, and I think strategically we might have had a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes plan up our sleeve in terms of picking the 7-1 bench and then not using them all the way they expected us to use them all.
Well, I wanted to come to that. That to me, it was a real head scratcher. I mean, you've gone 7-1 on the bench. Your goal kickers are a little bit shaky at the moment, yet you choose to go for 2 50-meter plus kicks for goal. When Marty Lebok, for all his frailties off the tee currently, he's one of the best touch finders when it comes to kicking penalties to touch. He kicks left-footed, right-footed, depending on the side of the field, and he usually puts them out 5-7 meters from the goal line.
That's right.
And so he's brilliant at doing that. And they didn't go there. I think they attempted 2 mauls in the entire match, and one of them was right at the end when the outcome was on the line. And I was actually talking to some Irish journalists, and Andrew Trimble was on that as well, former Irish international, and no one could quite work it out. Were the Boks hiding something? Were they holding something back? And if they are, that's a fairly dangerous game to play in a group where you're not guaranteed of getting through just yet. So, I mean, are we reading too much into it? Maybe they just made some poor decisions on the day, or do you think they were trying to hold a little bit back?
It's a difficult one to answer when you're not on the inner sanctum, and I definitely don't want to be one of those people who A, speculates, or B, who loves a conspiracy theory. I'll just say a few things. Like, very, very, very little is not strategically planned by Rassie and Jacques.
Yeah,
there's very little that happens in that team. There's very little surprises in that team. We've seen it over the 5 years that they've been together now. One theme that comes out from the players, every single player who's been in that squad says, we get clarity in terms of what we're doing. We know exactly what we need to do, where we need to do it. We know how good we are. We know what our strengths are, and we play to our strengths. And that's why I say it could possibly be a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes thing. The 7-1, not using them all. These are two guys that radically think out of the box. And I'm not talking about dropping your star players thinking out of the box like other coaches have done. I'm talking about strategically, they think out the box and they weigh up risk versus reward. And I'm wondering if this wasn't a situation of we actually need to put ourselves under a pressure situation in this scenario. And, we think we can beat Ireland, with this plan that we have. And in the cold light of day, if you consider, I think Ben O'Keefe had a reasonably good game, but he got it wrong at the end. I mean, Bundy Aki came in from the side. It was clear to see.
No doubt.
The way the maul was set up with the reserve loosehead who came on was completely and totally illegal, and it's just clear as daylight. So we score that try, then all of a sudden it's a different story. We're having a different conversation. So, I mean, I just think that. South Africa are still very confident in their plan. I think they know the way forward. I think they strategically, I just think that they knew that this was something that if it worked, we could have another really strong string to our bow. And if it didn't, I don't think they are sitting there saying that the World Cup is over now by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that the coaches they're saying that, and I think they're sitting there going, okay, well, we not rolled the dice. We took a strategic decision over here. We wanted to see if we can give ourselves another string to our bow. Maybe we move away from the maul a little bit more. Maybe we do exactly what we're doing at the moment, which is confuse people in terms of how we're going to play, because all that means is the next coaching staff are going to scratch their heads even more in terms of what is or is not going to come from the Springboks. And I know that Jacques and Rassie are very good at that. And then you're sitting in a situation going, well, where would you rather play France? Would you rather play them in the playoffs, or do you want to play them in a final in their own home country? And so, and you're going to have to play them because of the way the draw was. So, I'm not conspiracy theorizing. I'm just sharing some sentiments out there. And I don't think anything happened on the weekend by accident. Do I think the coach went out there to win that game? 100%. There's not even a question of a doubt about that. And the players did as well. And I think you could see the reaction afterwards that they were very disappointed.
One interesting stat that came, I found out just before we came on to this, the Dublin game last year, which the Boks lost 19-16 to Ireland. That was the only other time in the Rassie, Erasmus, Jacques, Nienaber era that the Boks had played Ireland. And they lost 19-16, and that day they also had a few issues from the kicking tee. And they also tried, according to the stats, 6 rolling mauls and was stopped every time. So could it have been something in Ireland's maul defence that the Boks decided to try something different? Or,
Yeah, absolutely. Again, have a look at this perspective from a different point of view. Everyone's saying we need a goal kicker, and everyone's bemoaning Marnie, etc. But what if he had got those kicks? What if he had got all those kicks? Then I think I can't remember, what was it, 11 points that we left out there?
It was 11. Although we've got to remember the Faf one that hit the upright led to a try. So, I mean, that was 5 instead of 3. So, actually, I suppose if we take it back, it was only 6 points that we left out there.
Okay. But the fact of the matter is, and there's an uproar about that, that's a situation. But I remember seeing Andre miss a couple of crucial kicks for us as well in the year. So, I think what I'm trying to say is have a look at it from a perspective of what if it did work? What if this play, exactly what you say now, both of them having coached in Ireland, knowing the mental adaptation that the Irish will make, knowing full well that the Irish probably would have put a huge amount of time in stopping our maul, and so they just took that problem away by going for goal, anticipating the fact that the guy might kick his goals. Again, it's always risk versus reward, and if we'd kicked those goals, then everyone would think, well, what a genius plan it was. We picked 7-1, everybody thought we were going to maul, and we didn't. We kicked our goals and we beat them in any case. Yeah. So, and as you say, in the 1916 result, as you say, we had 6 mauls that they neutralised pretty much. So, again, listen, the rugby coaching has become like chess now. It is a game of chess, one move and who reacts and who doesn't react. And I just feel both teams are in a really good space. And I just think it was such a high quality game of rugby that I'm reasonably neutral here, and I'm sitting as a neutral individual thinking those are 2 teams that are going to have a lot of confidence going forward. And then one last thing, psychologically as well, Craig, is South Africa have been the only team who have actually lost a game and gone on to win the World Cup.
Yeah.
So that narrative of what used to be now it's a train smash and you're definitely out the World Cup. Well, we know that isn't the case at all.
Yeah, look, Ireland. The one thing, Gary, I suppose Ireland, it would have been a bigger blow, I think, if Ireland had lost it to them than to the Boks, because of precisely what you've just pointed out. The Boks have been there before in this precise scenario. They know what to do, and they won't look at that game in the cold light of day and feel like they were a million miles off. They will know that they could have just as easily won that game as lost it. And Ireland, their current record is amazing. A 16-match winning streak, which is nothing to sneeze at Test level. As you will well know, it's tough. I mean, you were there in very, very good years, and it's hard. And and then 28 out of 30 tests they've won. That's a highly impressive record. And there's my only one thing. I thought maybe it was a chance for the Boks to just knock them psychologically, because if Ireland had lost this game, maybe the doubts would start creeping in. They've never got past the quarterfinal in the World Cup. All those kind of things. You might have gone a long way to eliminating a major rival with the win in this game.
Very true. But look, Craig, no matter what happens, Ireland will still be in uncharted waters. They will be. If they get through to semi-final and they find themselves in a final, they'll be in uncharted waters. And with the exception of maybe the Leinster guys who can look at recent Heineken Cup success, and I'm not talking recently because obviously they haven't had Heineken Cup success last year. But of the years that Johnny Sexton and those guys have had success, it's not the same level as a semi-final or final of a Rugby World Cup. And when it comes down to that, you're just going to look at those 2 team sheets and you're going to go 2 amazing rugby teams. What are the margins? They're minuscule. You almost can't even call them. And then one is sitting there hoping that one of the issues of the margins is a lot of the South African team have been there before, and this is completely new for Ireland. And I want to be careful when I say something like this, because Ireland have strung numerous tests together because they're obviously Six Nations champions. But it's going to be a situation for both teams now where there's no more time for a slip up. They are going to have to win every single. So if you look at that in context, Ireland are basically going to have to break the world record of consecutive tests won in order to win the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, good point.
That's no mean feat. You know what I mean? I mean, I think
we totally deserve it if they did it, right?
Well, 100%. And again, looking at that from a reasonably neutral point of view, I mean, that did look like the number 1 and 2 rugby teams in the world on the weekend. You know what I mean? Not very far followed by France and New Zealand, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we'll get to France a little bit in a moment and New Zealand and touch on it, but let's just continue with the analysis of this game. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, goal kicking. Because I did wonder, the recall of Andre Pollard for a hooker, that was always on the cards. The Boks were always looking to get him back in the squad in some way or another. Maybe you can unpack that. That seemed quite a bold call. I know Deon Fourie has played a lot of hooker, and you would have probably coached him when he was a hooker at some point in your career. But he hasn't played hooker for a long time. Marco van Staden maybe was a junior hooker, but he hasn't. I mean, I don't know if you guys at the Bulls ever used him as a hooker in training. So that's quite a a bold call. So Pollard comes in, and Libbok is already struggling a little bit from the tee, and suddenly he looks over his shoulder, and Pollard's there. Could that have? I know they're a tight-knit group, and everything is honest and open in this Bok camp, but human beings are human beings. Could Libbok have been looking over his shoulder and going, this guy's here, and we all know why he's here, because he kicks his goals, and that would have just added a little bit more pressure on him in a highly pressurized situation already? Or am I reading too much into that?
I think possibly reading too much into it. When I explain that environment, like any high performing environments, one of the things you do want is a position specific, very competitive scenario. So if that was one of the reasons, and I'm not saying it couldn't be one of the reasons. In fact, one of our Daily Maverick subscribers who's on the line, I saw a question saying, has the shot clock affected the kicker?
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a kicker, but I mean, if you don't have all the time at your leisure, one would imagine it could play in your mind. Of course. I mean, again, if I had 10 seconds to make my putt, would I feel more nervous than normal? Most definitely. So, that scenario, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, having Henry there very well could be putting Mani under pressure, considering he wasn't really being challenged in that 10 position before. And we, when they picked the squad, we knew he was going to start there. So, but the upside to that is that's what they want. They want Kwagga pushing Marco van Staden. They want the fact that, you look at it and you playing Ireland, you don't pick Dwayne Vermeulen. Wow. Is Jasper Visser pushing him that hard? And that's the competitive environment you want, because you create that within your camp. It's definitely going to bring out the best of you. And if it doesn't, well, then Andre must play. Then that's as simple as that. And it's almost one of those ones where you sort of need to divorce the emotion from it. We have to divorce the emotion from it as coaches, and you have to look at the facts. And if that is the case, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I could never tell you. I would have to have been at training and watched them kick, and they would have kicked for hours, and I would have then been able to maybe even just have an opinion then, and definitely not be able to have an effect. But if that is the case, then you could well have an insurance policy by if they go 6-2 or even if they go 5-3 again, that you could leave Andre on the bench, and if things do go awry, you could always bring him on. But again, I see today in the media that the Bok coaches have been at pains to also stress the fact that Andre is not Superman either. And the converse of this is that Andre comes in and everyone thinks, oh well, our problems are solved now. Andre also hasn't played a lot of Test rugby in the last year.
Well, let's get to that. I mean, he's played 30 minutes in the last 16 weeks. He's had a calf injury. He's 30 minutes at club level, club friendly, pre-season friendly, pretty much. He comes into a World Cup now, and now everyone's expecting he's just going to walk in and be what he was in 2019. And as you've just pointed out, that's not going to be the case. But it does lead to an interesting conundrum this weekend, coming up against Tonga in Marseille. He needs game time, so it's almost guaranteed he's going to play. And I'm guessing they're going to start with him. I mean, as a coach, what was your sort of preference when an injured guy comes back in? Do you like to start with him in case he breaks down again? You've got the fit guy on the bench, or do you go with the guy who's been injured, put him on the bench? But if the fit guy gets injured in the first minute, the guy coming back's got to play 79 minutes. So, what's a better scenario in your opinion for a guy returning from a long-term injury?
So the determining factor about that would be the severity of his injury. So I would have imagined they wouldn't have brought him back into camp if he was an injury risk in any way, shape, or form. So you have to assume that. I'm assuming that. I'm assuming they wouldn't have brought a 33rd player in to replace a hooker who still was 50-50 and didn't get through a game completely injury-free. And I would have imagined before he played for Leicester against Sale, he would have had quite a few training sessions. And I would say now that he's been in the Bok camp quite a few as well. So let's park that one, because you are right. That is exactly the conundrum we have as coaches. But let's just go on the assumption that injury is not going to reoccur. Not saying it won't, but let's say it's highly unlikely. Then for me, what I would like to do is I'd like to bring Andre off the bench. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to give Mani the confidence as well. He is the incumbent. I'd like to continue with him. And then, against a team like Tonga, it'll be hugely physical. We know that. We know they'll have a huge amount on the line to want to play for. Their pride, they would definitely want to leave the World Cup with something to be very proud about, because I actually see they're also copping a little bit of flack at the moment now, and so they'll really want to play. But I don't necessarily see that being too much of a problem for us. So it should be a game where, from a confidence point of view, if you brought Andre on for 30 minutes, I think that would be good if he finished out the game. In answer to your question as well, if they were to start with him, I wouldn't necessarily see that as a train smash either. You know what I mean? I suppose it depends how risk averse you are. If you were to start with him, as you quite correctly said, if anything should, touch wood, heaven forbid, go wrong, you would always have the insurance of having a Mani or a Damien who could fill in for him during the course of that game.
So Mani Lebok's kicking was well documented, although to be fair, he only missed 2 on the weekend out of the 4. But he did, Gary, I mean, and again, we're just speculating here, but he looks like he's striking the ball pretty well. I mean, there's no issues there. It's just, he's missing by small margins. It doesn't feel technically like it's a big fix for him. It's not like he's shanking them way left or pushing them way right. He's striking them beautifully. You can even see it in the stadium. It's just he's just missing a little something.
Yeah. So again, Craig, and I appreciate that not everybody wants to hear this, but again, we need to sort of the coaches need to remove the emotions out of it. As you say, he missed 2 in the weekend, but it's well documented that after the first round of Rugby World Cup, Gareth Wright, his kicking coach, was on the phone with him or did a Zoom with him, changed 1 or 2 things, and then in the following game, if my memory serves me correctly, I think he got every single kick over. So again, it's funny, I think, professional sport, because you get a label and then it's very difficult to lose that label or that tag. And Mani's a great ball player, Mani's brilliant with ball in hand, Mani's this and Mani brings that and he takes it to the line and blah blah blah, ask questions. Oh, but his goal kicking is terrible. Well, it isn't international standard, that's true. I mean, we're not denying that, but I think the way the Springboks want to go and where they need to go to be able to win this Rugby World Cup, I think they believe that Mani has quite a few other tricks up his sleeve that that can actually help them become a multi-level team. And I know this. I think we know this. We all know this. That in the last 4 years, the Bok coaches have worked really hard at developing the skill set of the Springboks. They don't want to be known as a team that just mauls the whole time or just scrums and kicks the ball all day long. And the last couple of years, we've scored some terrific tries. And you just think of how many times Kanan, Kirtley, Cheslin, Villy, those guys have scored like fantastic tries. And I think we definitely putting ourselves into a position where we want to ask more questions with ball in hand as well as be a big brutal pack. That the problem is that if you take that away from us, and I don't think Ireland took it away from us, but they certainly neutralized it. If you neutralize that, then the Boks of the past didn't have a plan B. And I think these coaches really want us to have a plan B from that point of view. So it's not a perfect situation. I think the whole thing is shrouded by the fact that we lost the game. We lost the game.
Exactly.
He missed 2 kicks, but as I said earlier, it was, and everybody's human. I'm certainly not having a go at the ref. I mean, it's not about that. But that was, when you work so hard and you prepare a team so hard, you really do expect something as blatant as that to be picked up. Or, again, one of the Daily Maverick subscribers put up here, why wasn't it even reviewed? Why wasn't it even reviewed? Technically, the situation, the offence, certainly Bandiaki's, was so bad that that's a penalty try.
Yeah,
immediately.
And that's 7 points, right? That's the game.
That's the game. That's not even debatable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're not debating whether it was or wasn't a penalty. I'm saying that's a penalty try.
Yeah.
So you could well feel the Bok coaches are sitting there going, people, you're going on and on about the kicking, but we did what we needed to do when we needed to do it. And as you say, you revert in the very last minute of the game to your go-to, and you get a reward from it, and you don't get the reward for what you've done the hard work for. So, look, there's the other school of thought, and that is that the 50-50 calls could potentially, not work in our favour as well. But I just think that one was quite clear. It was quite a clear call, that one.
Well, let's just look at some of the questions on the side before we continue. Well, we can. Alan McFarlane said, "Shouldn't we be getting Gareth Wright over there?" And I know, maybe you can give us the insight into a Bok coaching setup to suddenly bring in a consultant from the outside at this stage of the game. Would that be? I mean, it would be great for Marnie, maybe, but maybe a little bit sort of disruptive to the whole team environment if he hasn't been in that environment before.
I think so. Look, I know Gareth, and he's really good at his job. There's no question of a doubt about that. And I think personally, him and Marnie, by all accounts, do have a wonderful relationship. And I think he's really done amazing things for Marnie. I mean, we mustn't forget that Marnie was part of a URC winning team last year and a team that lost in the final this year. So
yeah,
Gareth's done some great work. I just think that there's a bigger picture. Firstly, there's issues around Rugby World Cup squad and when you announce your management team, etc., etc. And that you've got to do long in advance. You've got to prioritize where you want your kicking coach, or where you want your skills coaches. No, I don't think it would have been a train smash to bring him in. I don't think you would have been allowed to legally because you've announced coaching staff is. Obviously, there's a budget constraint to that as well, because then obviously you've got to bring somebody else in. And then there's also the risk is that there's Marnie, but Damien kicks and Faf is kicking, and now Andre is going to kick, and I'm missing one other guy. Peslin kicks as well. So, but has Gareth worked with any of those guys either? And so then that's probably a brand new kicking coach. And so again, it's for Marnie, it would be wonderful if Gareth was there, and I know that Gareth would definitely add value. But I think they're probably looking at it and going, well, the other guys, we haven't had a kicking coach for 4 years since we won a World Cup. Why should we bring that in now? So again, I don't know the actual answer to that. I'm just giving you an answer to a question that came up. And that is, it's a little bit more trickier to actually logistically do that. You're not allowed to bring in additional people.
Just on the subject of Marnie, and you touched on it a little bit earlier. I mean, as you say, the Boks have been developing their attacking plan, and Marnie certainly brings different skills to Andre. I mean, he's just got natural ability to, he's got the great ability to pass and put players into space, and not saying that Andre doesn't have those skills, but let's just say Marnie's got slightly better soft skills than Pollard, and also he's been in the environment the entire year. Pollard's been injured the entire year. So we've got to factor that in as well. We're not just talking about someone's reputation.
You really do have to factor that in.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that speaks to the whole cohesiveness of the group.
Exactly. They built the whole team around Marnie this year because they've had to, essentially. And now, because they've had a few issues off the tee, to change that all at a World Cup quarter-final stage, more or less, does sound risky to me.
Yes, if it was a new individual. I just think they've got a little bit of the best of both worlds here, because it's not a guy who's never been in camp with him. He just hasn't been in camp with him for a while. Yeah, so I wouldn't imagine, Andre coming into camp being a very difficult transition for him to make. But I do really understand why he wasn't thrown in to start immediately. Because they did probably give him a week or two, or now in this case, a couple of weeks for him to get back, run the plays again, acclimatize, get back to, the level of the intensity that he hasn't been used to because he's been out with his injury. So there's lots of permutations that come into it. It's not just that easy to throw somebody in, in the deep end, especially when Marnie was doing, I think Sia said it in a press conference the other day, if he's got 10 things to do, there might be one area, goal kicking, which is reasonably important. We're not denying that. But he's doing 8 or 10 of them at world-class level. You know what I mean? He's defending well. He's running the show. And again, don't forget as well, our attacking shape over the last couple of years has also seen Willie come in at first receiver many times as well, because of his passing skills, And so then you've got 2 first receivers, what we call 2 first receivers. So you've got Willie coming in as first receiver, and then either playing behind the pod or if they miss the pod completely or play the pod. From there on both sides, you've then got 2 first receivers to be able to attack both sides again. So, they've really developed quite a strong attacking game plan as well, along with the very strong fundamental base that they had from a defensive point of view in any case. So, Yeah, look, it's a World Cup. There's going to be lots of controversies, but I don't think the answer is that cut and dry. I don't think it's that easy to say, bring Henry in and put him in. And I think that's the message coming out of the Bok camp. As I'm reading at the moment, everyone's just going, I mean, Rassie and Jacques are just going, well, hang on a second, we have considered this, And I think they would have a plan. I think they will have a strategic plan.
I got the feeling Rassie's comments the other day were sort of laying the groundwork. Look, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Pollard will play against Tonga in some shape or form, and he is, but we're not chucking Mani away. I mean, that's what I think he was preparing people for through those comments, and acknowledging at the same time that goal kicking is an issue. But I mean, Nina said it before the World Cup when the Boks scored 5 tries against the All Blacks, and I think Mani missed a few off the tee that night, and the Boks won 35-7. And I think he said, I'd rather have Mani setting up 5 tries for me than kicking 100%. And some people might say, "Oh, that's flippant," and this is a World Cup, and so on. But if that's the path you've chosen to go down, then they've got to back their guy, haven't they?
No, they've got to back their guy. They've got to back their plan. They wouldn't have thumbsucked this plan in the last 6 months. I can promise you that. Not knowing these two, not knowing this coaching staff. So. Yeah. That's the real big thing. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think, Craig, as you said earlier, and all we've said earlier, is that they've been here before. They've lost a game in a pool stage. And they know how to dust themselves off. And I think they know the permutations. Not necessarily any easier or harder than it was in 2019, because they still got to play good teams to get to the final. And that's going to be no different this time. There's no doubt about that. So, that's where they are in the situation. I just look at this as a scenario. Can you imagine when Malcolm got injured if they had brought Joseph in?
Yeah.
And now everybody would be saying what they're saying with Andre not in camp.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's again.
I don't think that these guys, when people are angry because Mani's not a 95% goal kicker, I don't think Rassie and Jacques ignored that. I don't think they ignored that. Otherwise, I don't think they would have brought Andre in when they had the opportunity to bring him in. So, again, there's just two sides to the coin, and I just think it's important to stay objective about having a look that, it's not just an easy situation to say, oh, well, let's start Andre because of all the permutations that we've both set out already.
Some questions on the side, and actually this is on this. Byron Ritters asked us, and thanks for the questions, everyone. Please keep them coming. We'll try and get to as many as we can. Why didn't they let Faf do all the kicking? And that's a fair question. I mean, the two he missed were from 56 meters and 54 meters, and he struck them both pretty well. He certainly struck the first one very well. I didn't think he was even going to get close, and he hit the upright and could have. And so the point being, well, why not just take that pressure off Mani and say, Faf, you're the goal kicker? I mean, he clearly does a decent job of it, or is that?
But he missed 2. But he missed 2. But he missed 2.
Yeah. So
again, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. So now, then the narrative would have been, well, why are we using Faf to kick a goal when he doesn't kick a goal for his club and he hasn't? I'm just giving you the argument that people will say. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation. You can't win because. When he did set up 5 tries and he still did really well from a couple of his kicks. And as you said, it's not as if he's shanking them, he's striking them well, as we've already alluded to. He fixed the problem the first time, he could fix it again, So again, I just think it could be a bit of a situation where you don't want to get into slim funkse boss. You don't want to get into a situation where you've got, now you're rotating kickers the whole time and then, everybody's confused, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's a fair point. That's been made about Faf. But again, Faf isn't a 90% goal kicker either.
No, exactly. So we know these coaches, and I've worked with them for years. You've known them for years and worked with them in various guises. They are micromanagers in a good way. They plan. They have scenarios. They have a plan for the back. They have a backup plan for the backup plan. They really go through the scenarios. But we've got a question here from Fran, and she says, what do you think of the lights from the coach's box? Is that genius, or is that micromanaging the leaders on the field? Now, I know Jacques tried to tell us it was all just about injuries and whether someone comes. Well, we know that's nonsense. They're sending out signals. And I guess coaches talk all the time through the mics, through the guy on the field, the assistant coach on the field, or whoever's running the water on the field anyway. Is this just another way of getting a message down there? Maybe a bit faster, a bit more, taking out the middleman, so to speak.
Look, I genuinely don't know what the lights represent. I've never been, in the years that Rassie and I worked together and Jacques, we never used the lights. So I can't give you any expertise answer to that. And I think it is a case of each to their own. Do I think it's just another way of getting a message on? Yes, I do. I do. Your water carriers are going to get them on. When the box started and Jacques was running on the other side of the field, because he's actually a recognized medical officer as well, because he's a trained physiotherapist, Jacques was giving messages on, and they were concise and they were precise messages. And it could just be a way that now that Jacques is in the head coach and he's up in the coaching box, that's what Rassie feels. It's different strokes for different folks. Personally, it's not my cup of tea. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, as in, I don't know what the lights mean. So, I mean, they could be something that's genius. I do know that when years ago, when we were in the Bok camp, I remember speaking to one or two of the Cheetahs players, and I was very surprised to hear, like, senior Springboks who played for the Cheetahs in those days actually did quite like the light system. They did enjoy it. They enjoyed the help in terms of that a guy is making a decision where his heart rate's not at 180. But remember, he's not making a decision that they haven't planned before. They will know exactly, what their options are on the field over there. It could just be something as simple as just saying, yes, take them all, or no, let's, in this situation, go for goal. And it'll be the same question that Sia's going to ask himself on the field at the time. And, maybe it might be a situation of relieving the pressure. As I say, it's different strokes for different folks. I know a lot of coaches don't like that, and it's not seen in a good light. Again, I can't tell you whether it's genius or not, because I don't know enough about it. But I think, post the World Cup, we'll find out from the players whether they enjoyed it or not. And I think it's an environment that if they didn't enjoy it, if they didn't feel it added value, I think they would say that to Rassie and Jacques. I think so. I'm not sure that those lights. Yeah, I'm not sure that those. I agree. I'm not sure that those lights are, as hectic as what people think they are. You know what I mean?
Could it just be Rassie trying to get into other people's heads a bit as well? That's part of,
It could be that, but it could also just be a situation of, that they've sat down with Sia and said, or Sia, or whoever's captain at the time on the field, do you want our opinion? And the guy might say, yes, I want your opinion.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he has to go for it. They may very well give him an opportunity to overrule him. So again, it's not fair for me to make an educated comment on something I don't know enough about.
And I'm just looking at some of the questions, and we're sort of jumping around on topics, but I think it's fine. We can guide it back to where we want to go. But Martin Oosthuizen's asked, he's a bit worried about the Boks losing the ball in contact. He says, why is there so much losing the ball in contact? Now, I'll just give my 5 cents here, because I was watching it live. And if you, I know TV conveys so much, but I promise you the ferocity and the intensity of that game and the contact was on a level I think the 2009 second test Lions comes to mind, which
yes.
we were very involved with. It was at that level of
yes.
ferocity. And so players are going to make mistakes, because stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. Mistakes happen because of pressure. And, the pressure was claustrophobic on Saturday night. So maybe you'll have a slightly better, more detailed insight for us, Gary, on that.
I've sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'll go into a little bit more detail of when I gave you the scenarios about where they turned us over a couple of times as well. And I'm not sure if Martin's talking about losing the ball in contact as in the ball slipping out, or as in us getting turned over. But I think the same answer applies to both. Is, Craig, how many high tackle penalties were there in the game on the weekend? Firstly, how many cards were given? None. No high tackle penalties. Yeah. In almost a game of rugby of that intensity, where almost no other game in this entire World Cup doesn't get away with a high tackle, let alone a card.
Yeah.
In Tonga's case, 2. You know what I mean? So I thought South Africa and Ireland's tackle technique on the weekend was something that I've almost never seen before, to that quality. Both teams, and I'm going to give credit here, were so exceptionally well coached from a tackle technique point of view. both coaches must have driven in the fact that they can't afford to play each other with 14 men. They don't want to lose somebody for the rest of the World Cup. I just thought, and I have had the benefit of being able to go through the game and analyse each breakdown and each tackle. I think, to answer Martin's question and to back up what you're saying, the veracity and the quality of the execution of the tackles were absolutely brilliant. I gave the example of when Gary Ringrose chopped Jasper Visser, and I mean chopped him. He flew out of line, completely legally, completely onside, chopped him at the legs. Our cleaners were a little bit late to get there. They were straight over the ball. The second one where Calum Doris hit Sia, Johnny Sexton decided to go and attack the ball, which I wouldn't have seen that a lot of times with Johnny Sexton before. And the two of them literally choked him up until he managed to get a knee onto the ground. So I think both teams are really good ball carriers, and we know that and I do think Martin's quite correct. We are very, very good at our ball carrying, and we know we've got great ball carriers. But I think you must factor into the account that was probably one of the best defensive displays, and hence the reason why it wasn't a 30-40 pointers game, and it was still incredibly entertaining. Yeah, and I think it was entertaining because I think it was back and forth the whole time. It was a game of intense, excellent quality defense skills. I mean, it's probably one of the best blueprints I've seen for a defensive performance on both sides of the ball. Both teams defended really well.
RN saying, well, why didn't Ireland lose the ball? Well, they did quite a bit, actually. They knocked on a few times as well. And, they lost the balls the pressure told in other areas, the lineouts, for instance, early on and so on. Exactly. There's no such thing as a perfect game of rugby, and especially not at that intensity. But talking about Gary Ringrose chopping and the cleaners arriving a bit late, it's been asked here as well, but it was something I wanted to get to. So thanks to, I think it was Andrew Brown, yes, Dwayne versus Jasper. Dwayne Vermeulen was sitting in the coach's box on Saturday night. The Boks have lost Malcolm Marx, probably their best player over the ball in the loose. And I would say Dwayne's probably the next best, even at 37 or whatever he is these days.
And Dion, yeah.
And Dion, so in that scenario, having lost Marx, would you not have been tempted to start Dwayne Vermeulen just to give yourself some breakdown insurance? Knowing Josh van der Fly is coming, Calum Doris, those kind of players. Gary Ringrose gets in over the ball as well as Bandi Aki. Would Vermeulen have been? And we're all clever in hindsight, but in hindsight, would you think Vermeulen would have made a difference in this game? In the first half, particularly?
In my opinion, yes. And I don't know anything for those reasons. I just think from a sheer experience, leadership point of view, I mean, Jasper's playing great rugby at the moment. I don't think anybody disputes that. But just, how Sia would feel with Dwayne being there, how Eben would feel with Dwayne being there. If Dion came on and he knew that Dwayne was there, I do feel that this is just my humble opinion. And again, I'm going to say that I think Rassie and Jacques would have had a strategic reason for that. But in my opinion, when I saw the team being announced, I was quite surprised to see that Dwayne wasn't at least on the bench. Yeah. And especially when he went 7-1, I thought, exactly. and again, just because of what Dwayne brings. So on that one, I do have to agree with you. But again, that's just my opinion as an armchair supporter, looking at that at the moment now. And it's definitely not a slight on Jasper, but I just really think that Dwayne offers a huge amount to the team from a seniority point of view. And again, whether people do or don't like him, at the end of the day, they also did, because of the 7-1, they didn't pick a second back, so Villy fell out, which again, I say, whether you like him or you don't like him, he's a senior player, and I know that Kirtley and Kanan and those guys have spoken incredibly high, and Cheslin, of how he organises the backfield and how he talks the whole time. And I know that some people get frustrated with that, but at least he's talking, he's communicating, and he's helping. So you played a game with two very senior heads not being available, and I understand the Villy part, but I do think I agree with you on the Dwayne thing. For me, it was a little bit of a mystery.
Okay, so we've got 10 minutes and the time has flown. And we've got to turn our attention to Tonga quickly, and then, maybe a little bit beyond that. Tonga, okay, so people have asked what the Boks have to do. I think that's quite simple. They've got to win. They've got to get a try scoring bonus point. They've got to get to 15 log points, which the Boks are currently sitting on 10. So they've got to get to 15 log points. So they've got to win with a try scoring bonus point. First things first, and then try and win by as big a margin as possible, just to on the points difference. And if you're going to all just bear with me, I'm going to have to read this to you because these are the. So we have a scenario where the Boks could get to 15 points. Ireland are currently on 14 points. Let's say Scotland beat Ireland with a bonus point, and Scotland get 5 points against Romania, and then beat Ireland with a bonus point. Scotland go to 15 points, log points. Ireland, let's say, lose that game by fewer than 7 points. They get 1 point. They go to 15 points. You have a scenario with 3 teams on 15 points. So how does it work? So I'm going to read from the official World Rugby thing. The winner of the match in which the 2 teams have played each other shall be the higher ranked. Now that's if you just got 2 teams stuck on the same points. The team which has the best difference between points scored and points scored for and points scored against in all its pool matches shall be the higher ranked. Okay, so that's the second tiebreaker. So the first tiebreaker is between the 2 sides. Second tiebreaker is points difference. The team which has the best difference between tries scored for and tries scored against. So that's just the third tiebreaker. Tries scored, and then most points or least points. So those are, and then tries in all its pool matches. Should the tie be unresolved at the conclusion of steps 1 through 5, the rankings as per updated on the official World Rugby rankings on 2 October 2023 shall determine the higher ranked team. So for clarification, in the case of a tie between 3 or more teams, so that's the 15-point scenario at the end of the pool phase, once the highest ranked team has been determined following the above criteria, so that's criteria 1 to 5, to determine the next higher ranked team, the process would repeat starting with criteria 1. So therefore, it can get so complex from you. Clear as mud. Thank you, Fred.
Points each. Yeah.
So I had to go through that. Bottom line is, can Ireland just beat Scotland, please? So then,
I like what Fran has said. Thanks, Craig.
Well, she's a huge Irish fan, so it is. But I mean, this group faces this scenario. It could face a 3 teams on 15-point scenario. So let's turn to Tonga. The Boks have to win it. They have to win it well, because you're going to expect Scotland to put a boat full of points on Romania and then throw all their guns at Ireland on October the 7th. So do the Boks now, Gary, because let's assume they make it to the quarterfinals. They've got a 2-week gap. They play Tonga on October the 1st. The quarterfinals only on October the 14th. Do they rest some of the key players now? Which means they wouldn't have played for 3 weeks by the time a quarterfinal comes around, because September the 23rd was the Ireland game. Or do they go full strength against Tonga? Pretty much the same team that played last week with a few minor tweaks. To keep the momentum and give those guys game time with a week's rest before the quarterfinal build-up. What's your gut feel there?
I think you go with the same team from the weekend with a few minor tweaks, and you bring 1 or 2 of those senior players back into the group, and you start to build momentum now. I think for me, not even a question of a doubt. It's your last pool game, as you already said. There's a 2-week break after that. You're never going to replicate that level of intensity in a training session. Are there risks involved? Of course, there are risks involved, but there are also risks involved in not playing players. And the science will tell you the better scenario is to build momentum and keep playing. One thing we will get from Tonga is they will make us battle hardened. I think we'll win comfortably. I think we'll blow them off the park. I can't possibly see their flanker from the weekend not getting a red card, not having that card not lifted to a red card, because, I mean, I've almost never seen anything that, I don't even know why it was referred to the bunker, let alone, the fact that it's even been reviewed now. So my humble opinion is I think we need to start building momentum now. Agree on your best 23, 25, whether you go 6-2, whether you go 5-3, which I don't think they will do, whether they choose to stick with 7-1, which I don't think they will do, then I think, start to build momentum and get some, the same guys running in the same place as often as you possibly can. And one of the things that we've done really, really well is obviously our bench rotation. And so just, bear in mind, the guys who start in the weekend, all the guys that come off, they're probably going to get between 30 and 50 minutes of rugby in any case, everybody. Yeah. So we're not asking anybody to go we're not asking the majority of the team not to go the full 80 minutes. So I think we need to build momentum now. I think the time of experimenting is over now, and I think we're getting into the business end of the season, and we're lucky. We're lucky. We're not in the position that Ireland and Scotland have got. We don't have a must-win. Well, we do have a must-win game, but with respect, we've got an opposition that we can go out and we can put to the sword. I believe.
Yeah.
And through all the permutations, I do feel that. I mean, looking at those two teams in the weekend, one, I'm talking about South Africa and Ireland, I would find it very difficult to see how Tonga and or Scotland were able to upset us. Particularly if Scotland have lost their captain to a concussion, because I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for. So, obviously, I do think Scotland are very good, but I think Ireland are exceptional. So, I see those two teams going through quite comfortably.
So if it all goes according to plan, as we hope it does, the Boks are likely to come up second in this pool now. That means almost certainly a quarterfinal against France. You can't see France slipping up against Italy in their last sort of big pool game. And that's going to be difficult. I mean, that opening game, the atmosphere was incredible. The French crowd really gets on the refs' back. It's a tough place, and you're not going to get too many 50-50 calls, even at a World Cup against France. But Sans and Antoine Dupont without Romain Intermac and possibly Julian Marchand, maybe he's back. The Boks have done so well against the All Blacks, and there's probably no real fear there anymore, but there is familiarity. Maybe does the French game match up better for the Boks in a quarterfinal?
Yeah, look, it's going to be incredibly difficult to play them. I need to say that from the get-go, Craig. I mean, I would hate anybody on this call to think that France are going to be a pushover. It's going to be titanic. It's going to be absolutely titanic. I just think, again, I'm thinking back to the mindset of players and staff who've been in this position before. And being in a position before does give you comfort. It does, whether you like it or not. And comfort leads to confidence, and confidence leads to clarity of what you're trying to do. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I think for South Africa, the route we're going at the moment now is we have to play France somewhere if they keep winning and we keep winning. And I would much rather prefer to play them in the quarterfinals than I would at a later stage of the competition. I mean, am I sitting here saying that I think we're going to win? I'm not necessarily saying that. I think it'll be, again, a titanic struggle. I think we'll have to get a lot of things right. But playing at home and talking about the 16th man and the atmosphere, that also exerts a lot of pressure. That exerts an incredible amount of pressure on a team. And if I think Dupont will play, but he won't be 100%. He probably wouldn't have trained between now and the week of that game. In fact, I'm quite sure he won't be able to. And as you say, losing Intermac, although Jalibert, there's nothing wrong with him, and that they've got some great players. But I just think we've got to play them at some stage. And I think my humble opinion is I think we prefer to play them earlier rather than later.
And on that note, thank you, Gary Gold. Thanks so much for joining us. Your insights were really insightful and gave us a lot of illumination on what goes on in the mindset there. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions. Thanks for joining us. Do sign up for my Breakdowns and Baguettes newsletter from France coming out every Thursday if you're interested in staying on top of the Rugby World Cup goings on. And we'll do a few more of these webinars. Hopefully, Gary maybe will even join us again if he can get some time off from his day job. Thanks, Gary. And
thank you very much.
Everyone, good night and enjoy the evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.